Let's talk about resumes. Resumes may not land you a job, but they definitely get your foot in the door. So this has been actually a very highly requested video. I'm gonna be going over this resume that I used to get an interview at Google and eventually to be hired. As you can see, there's 5 different sections that I have: details, experience, education, skills, and accomplishments. These are the sections that I like to use, but they are by no means the only way to structure your resume. I know some people like to put an objective section and maybe a project section, which is totally cool. I chose to leave those out because I just ran out of space. So speaking of space, this is very important. Notice I kept my resume at 1 page max in length. It's very important to keep your resume concise and to the point. And I'm sure you might be wondering, why keep your resume shorter? Shouldn't you go over absolutely everything that you've done? So my reasoning for keeping it 1 page max is because most people reading your resume will just skim it. They're not gonna read it super in depth, especially if there are a lot of candidates for the position you're applying for. It's unrealistic to think that the person going over your resume is going to read it super in depth. According to a career site, Ladders Inc., they did a study about how long a candidate's resume is screened for and found that the average initial screening time for a candidate's resume clocks in at just 7.4 seconds. This study was apparently back in 2018, so I don't know if this has changed, to today, but still 7 seconds is a very short amount of time. If you have 2 or more pages on your resume, there won't even be enough time to read all of the headers. I think the only time you should have your resume be longer than 1 page is if you have many years of experience. But if you're early in your career or haven't even started your first job yet, try to keep it short. Next, what I want to discuss is the order of importance for each of these sections. I'm also going to throw in some sections that I didn't include in my resume. The most important, without question, is the details section. This is how employers know who you are. The next priority, it could be either the experience or project section. I think either or is fine. These 2 sections describe how you contribute, what you've worked on. It paints a picture for the employer as to how you might perform on the job. So if you're a new grad and you don't have any experience, that's totally fine. Just fill most of your resume with personal projects, school projects, whatever things you've worked on in your free time. And if you don't have any experience or projects that you've worked on, go work on a simple project that takes a day to solve. It could be automating a tedious task or creating a personal website. That's something that I did when I didn't have a lot of projects or experience. I went and created just a dummy portfolio website, pretty much just going over like what languages I knew and what classes I took. And then I pawned that off as a project. Another thing I did when I had no experience is I made a mixtape maker and then I wrote random dumb scripts and then I just threw them all on my resume. Then once you start gaining some experience at a job, you can swap out your projects with your, real world experience. That's why on my resume currently, I don't have a project section anymore because the experience section is a bit more important now that I've been working in the industry for several years. Also, if you have experience and projects, by all means, show both. Before I worked at several jobs, I included both an experience and project section. So it's totally up to you. The next priority is the education section. The education section can be very general. It could go over a degree that you achieved, certificates that you were awarded, coding boot camps you graduated from, whatever it is that relates to you. If you're looking for ways to fill up your resume a bit more, maybe you don't have a lot of experience or projects, this is the section to do it. If you're in school, you can write down some classes that you've completed and what you did in them. If you have some certification, describe it here. This is the perfect place to do it. The next section is the skills section. Definitely lower on the totem pole, but it's very important nonetheless. List out any languages or tools you are familiar with here. Later on in the video, I'll go over why this is important. Finally, the objective and accomplishment section are the lowest priority. So if you're filling up your resume with all of these sections to the 1 page max and you're trying to find stuff to remove these sections first. They're really just nice to haves, but they likely won't be the deciding factor in you getting an interview. So now let's dive into each section of my resume. Starting off with the details section, I have my name, the role that I recognize as professionally, phone, email, GitHub link. Only put your GitHub link if you have an active GitHub. If you don't actually update your GitHub with anything you're working on, I personally wouldn't bother adding this. Most people won't actually view it anyway, but there's still a chance they will. So that's why I recommend only putting it on your resume if you actually update it. For my experience section, I listed out different responsibilities that I had in each role. So some things to note when writing your experience section: bold any technologies used that you mention in this section. Remember, because people will skim over your resume. For example, if someone was looking at my resume and they were looking for a Python developer, they would immediately be able to see Python, SQL Alchemy, Celery, Flask, Django. If these important terms were not bolded, it just might be missed. Another really important tip, and I think I even mentioned this in my other resume video, please always write your sentences in terms of metrics or goals. Specifically, try to write these metrics or goals in ways that directly benefit the company you worked for or are working for. So as an example, one of my sentences I use: designed, developed, and tested REST API endpoints relating to menu structures utilizing the Django framework, which led to several new partnerships. Adding the phrase "led to several new partnerships" expresses that I directly helped the company make more money. Or another example: ingested large data sets to Postgres and optimized SQL queries for a performance increase of nearly 50%. This not only describes technically what I did, but the impact that I made. I made the queries faster by cutting the execution time in half. Writing sentences this way really makes you stand out as a candidate, in my opinion. Moving on to the education section, I graduated with a computer science degree, so I mentioned the degree, university, and GPA, and that's really it. This section for you can look drastically different, like I mentioned earlier. Feel free to include certifications, courses you completed, boot camps attended, whatever you want to portray. Next is my skills section. So I broke up the sections by languages, frameworks, databases, methodologies, and then other. So I felt like these headers covered my area of knowledge, and any one-off skills that you want to describe can just go under the other header. This section obviously gives the reader an understanding of your technical abilities, but there's another really important reason to include this. If you're applying to a large company, chances are the resume will usually go through some automated process before it even gets in the hands of an actual human. These automated tools will look for specific keywords that the company sets. So if the company is looking for Java, Docker, MongoDB, whatever it is, their scanner will pick it up. So listing out all of the tools that you are comfortable with will ensure the scanner picks up these important terms. Now, be careful with this. Don't list a million things, of course, but list the languages and tools you're comfortable with. Finally, there is the accomplishments section. So I listed out 2 quick sentences of things that I was proud of. I really like having this section because it differentiates you from other candidates. I've had a ton of interviews where my YouTube channel actually comes up and they ask a bunch of questions about it simply because I put 1 sentence on my resume. Now, this section is completely optional, but I personally have had a lot of great success with it. So if you'd like a free resume template that mirrors my resume, head over to my public Discord channel where we link there, and then I'm also gonna have it linked in the description of this video. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video, and I'll see you all next time.